My aunt always pulled my cousin away from me. She'd glare angrily, interrupt every conversation. I thought she was just a control freak, until I read her old letters in the drawer. Growing up, my cousin and I were inseparable. We lived 3 blocks apart, and our mothers were sisters who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, so family gatherings were frequent and comfortable. From the time I could walk, she was my constant companion during those long summer afternoons when both our parents worked late shifts. We'd spend hours in her backyard, building elaborate forts out of old cardboard boxes her father brought home from his workplace. She had this amazing imagination, could turn a refrigerator box into a spaceship, a castle, or a secret laboratory depending on her mood that day. I was always the willing assistant, holding tape while she explained her grand architectural plans with the seriousness of someone designing actual buildings. The creek behind her house became our personal adventure zone. We'd catch tadpoles in mason jars, convinced we were conducting important scientific research. She always insisted on releasing them back after a few hours because she said it wasn't fair to keep them from their families. Even at 7 years old, she had this strong sense of right and wrong that I admired. During school years, we'd walk to the bus stop together every morning. She lived closer to the pickup point, so I'd swing by her house, and we'd trudge through snow or dodge puddles depending on the season. She always had extra snacks in her backpack. Her mother packed enough food for a small army, and she'd share her homemade cookies or fruit roll-ups without me even asking. Our friendship had this easy, natural quality that I took completely for granted. We never had to work at being comfortable around each other. She could sit in complete silence while I played video games, perfectly content to read a book nearby. I could listen to her practice piano for hours without getting bored, even when she played the same piece over and over until she got it right. But looking back now, I realize my aunt's behavior started changing when we hit middle school. At first, it was subtle things I barely noticed. She'd call my cousin inside earlier than usual when I came over to play. She'd suggest alternative activities when we wanted to hang out alone in the backyard. She'd volunteer to drive us places separately instead of letting us ride together in the back seat. The summer before 8th grade, things escalated noticeably. My aunt began finding reasons to interrupt us constantly. If we were watching a movie in the living room, she'd suddenly remember urgent chores my cousin needed to complete immediately. If we were sitting on the front porch talking, she'd appear with grocery lists or household tasks that apparently couldn't wait another minute. She started making these pointed comments about how we should spend time with other friends too. She'd mention classmates by name, suggesting my cousin invite them over instead of always hanging out with me. She'd bring up school activities and clubs, pushing my cousin to join groups that met after school or on weekends, times we usually spent together. The most confusing part was how she'd watch us. I'd catch her standing in doorways, observing our conversations with this strange, worried expression. If we laughed too hard at something, she'd ask what was so funny with this suspicious tone. If we were sitting close together on the couch, she'd find reasons to make us move apart. Suddenly the cushions needed fluffing or she needed to clean that exact spot. During family barbecues and holiday gatherings, she became hypervigilant about our interactions. She'd position herself where she could monitor everything we said and did. If we wandered off to talk privately, she'd follow within minutes, asking if we needed anything or reminding my cousin about some forgotten responsibility. I started feeling uncomfortable in her house, which had been like a second home to me for years. The woman who used to ruffle my hair and slip me extra dessert at dinner now treated me like some kind of threat. She'd answer my phone calls with short, clipped responses and always had reasons why my cousin couldn't come to the phone or wasn't available to hang out. My cousin seemed as confused as I was, but she was naturally obedient and didn't question her mother's increasingly strict rules. When I'd ask her about it, she'd just shrug and say her mom was going through a stressful period at work or something. She seemed to accept the new restrictions as temporary inconveniences rather than permanent changes to our friendship. Update 1. High school brought everything to a head in ways I never saw coming. The first major shock happened right before sophomore year started. My cousin had always attended the same school district as me. We'd planned our class schedules together, looked forward to having lunch periods at the same time, even talked about joining some of the same clubs. Then, 3 weeks before school started, my aunt announced they were transferring my cousin to a private school across town. Not just any private school, one with a strict uniform policy, mandatory study halls, and limited social activities. The kind of place that prided itself on academic rigor and traditional values. My cousin was devastated. She'd been looking forward to taking art classes with the teacher everyone raved about, joining the drama club, maybe trying out for the softball team. This new school had none of those opportunities. It was small, conservative, and focused entirely on college preparation with zero emphasis on creative or recreational activities. When I asked my aunt about the sudden change, she gave me vague responses about better educational opportunities and smaller class sizes. But something in her eyes told me there was more to the story. She couldn't quite meet my gaze when she explained the decision, and she kept fidgeting with her wedding ring the way she did when she was nervous or hiding something. The distance between schools meant we couldn't see each other during the day anymore. Our easy routine of walking to the bus stop together ended abruptly. No more shared lunches, no more comparing notes about teachers and assignments, no more coordinating our schedules around each other's activities. Weekends became our only opportunity to spend time together, but even those visits became increasingly supervised and limited. My aunt would set specific time limits for our hangouts. She'd create elaborate schedules of household chores and family obligations that somehow always conflicted with our plans. She'd suggest group activities instead of letting us spend time alone. The new school kept my cousin busy with heavy homework loads and mandatory weekend study sessions. She seemed exhausted all the time, stressed about keeping up with the academic demands while adjusting to a completely different social environment. The confident, creative girl I'd grown up with started seeming anxious and overwhelmed. Our conversations began feeling stilted and awkward. We had less in common now that we weren't sharing daily experiences. She'd tell me about her strict teachers and demanding coursework, while I'd share stories about football games and school dances she couldn't attend. The natural ease of our childhood friendship started slipping away without either of us knowing how to stop it. I found myself getting angry at my aunt in ways I'd never experienced before. This woman had been like a second mother to me throughout my childhood, but now she felt like an obstacle I couldn't understand or overcome. I'd lie in bed at night trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, what had changed, why she suddenly seemed to view me as some kind of negative influence. My cousin started making new friends at her school, serious, studious kids who spent their free time on academic competitions and volunteer work. They were nice enough when I met them, but we had nothing in common. I felt like an outsider in conversations about debate tournaments and scholarship applications, subjects that had never mattered in our previous friendship. The worst part was seeing how the separation affected my cousin. She was naturally social and had always been happiest when surrounded by friends and family. The isolation of her new school, combined with her mother's increasing restrictions on our friendship, made her seem smaller somehow. Less vibrant and confident than the girl who used to turn cardboard boxes into magical kingdoms. Update 2. Junior year brought a development that blindsided everyone in our family. My aunt, who had always been the picture of health and energy, started experiencing strange symptoms that doctors couldn't immediately explain. She'd have dizzy spells during normal activities, severe headaches that lasted for days, episodes of confusion that scared everyone who witnessed them. After months of tests and specialist appointments, they discovered a brain tumor. Not cancerous, thank God, but positioned in a location that made surgery risky and complicated. The doctors recommended a wait-and-watch approach with regular monitoring, but the tumor was affecting her cognitive function and emotional regulation in unpredictable ways. Suddenly, her years of strange behavior toward me and my cousin made more sense. Brain tumors can cause personality changes, paranoia, irrational fears, and obsessive thinking patterns. The woman who had spent years convinced that my cousin and I had inappropriate feelings for each other had been dealing with a medical condition that distorted her perception of reality. My family rallied around her during this frightening time. Despite everything that had happened between us, I couldn't stand to see her suffering. She was still the woman who had taught me to ride a bike, who had stayed up all night when I had pneumonia in 3rd grade, who had cheered louder than anyone at my Little League games. I started spending time at their house again, helping with household tasks and errands that had become difficult for her to manage. My cousin was overwhelmed trying to balance her demanding school schedule with caring for her mother, so I'd come over after my classes ended to help with grocery shopping, cooking dinner, or just keeping my aunt company during her bad days. During one of these visits, while organizing her bedroom to make it easier for her to find things during her confused episodes, I discovered something that changed everything I thought I understood about our situation. Hidden in the back of her nightstand drawer, underneath old prescription bottles and medical documents, was a small wooden box I'd never seen before. Inside were dozens of letters, handwritten correspondence between my aunt and her best friend from college, dating back nearly a decade. I know I shouldn't have read them, but something about the dates made me curious. These letters covered the exact time period when her behavior toward me and my cousin had become so strange and controlling. The first few letters seemed normal enough, updates about work, family news, complaints about everyday problems. But as I read deeper into the collection, a disturbing pattern emerged. My aunt had been documenting her growing suspicions about my relationship with my cousin in elaborate detail, analyzing every interaction we had like some kind of detective investigating a crime. She wrote about how we sat too close together during family movie nights, how we'd whisper and laugh together during holiday dinners, how we seemed to prefer each other's company over spending time with other relatives. She described our friendship using language that made it sound secretive and inappropriate, even though from my perspective we were just being normal cousins who enjoyed each other's company. The letters revealed that she'd been convinced for years that my cousin and I were harboring romantic feelings for each other that we were either too young to understand or deliberately hiding from the adults in our family. She wrote about losing sleep over her concerns, about researching signs of inappropriate relationships between relatives, about feeling responsible for protecting my cousin from what she perceived as a dangerous situation. Reading her words was like looking into the mind of someone whose reality had become completely disconnected from actual events. She described innocent moments between us, sharing snacks, helping each other with homework, sitting together at family gatherings, as evidence of romantic attraction. She interpreted our natural comfort and affection as cousins who had grown up together as something sinister that needed to be stopped. The most heartbreaking part was reading about her internal struggle with these suspicions. She genuinely loved both of us and felt torn between her desire to maintain family harmony and her conviction that she needed to protect my cousin from something that existed only in her increasingly paranoid imagination. She wrote about feeling like the only adult who could see what was really happening, about the burden of having to make difficult decisions to keep us apart. Final update. The revelation from those letters hit me like a physical blow. Everything I'd interpreted as control and manipulation had actually been a sick woman's desperate attempt to protect her daughter from a threat that existed only in her deteriorating mind. The years of separation, the school transfer, the constant supervision, all of it had been motivated by genuine fear and love, even though the fear was based on delusions. I sat in that bedroom for over an hour, reading and rereading those letters, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. My aunt hadn't been trying to hurt us out of spite or control. She'd been trying to save us from something she truly believed was real and dangerous. The tragedy wasn't just that she'd been wrong, but that her medical condition had made it impossible for her to see how wrong she was. The hardest part was realizing how much damage had already been done. My cousin and I weren't 8 years old anymore, building forts and catching tadpoles without a care in the world. We were nearly adults who had spent crucial years of our adolescence being trained to feel awkward and uncomfortable around each other. The natural, easy friendship that had defined our childhood was gone, replaced by years of forced distance and artificial barriers. When I tried to explain the situation to my cousin, showing her the letters and helping her understand what had really been happening, she struggled to process the information. She'd spent years believing that our friendship had naturally evolved into something different as we grew up, that the distance between us was normal and expected. Learning that it had all been orchestrated based on her mother's medical condition was devastating. We attempted to rebuild our relationship, but it felt like trying to resurrect something that had died years earlier. Too much time had passed, too many shared experiences had been lost, too many new habits and boundaries had been established. We were different people now, shaped by years of separation during the most formative period of our lives. My cousin had adapted to her mother's restrictions by becoming more independent and self-reliant. She learned to find fulfillment in academic achievements and individual pursuits rather than close friendships. The social, creative girl who used to turn every gathering into an adventure had become someone who was more comfortable alone with her books and projects. I developed my own coping mechanisms during those years of rejection and confusion. I learned to be suspicious of close relationships, to hold people at arm's length rather than risk the kind of inexplicable loss I'd experienced with my cousin. The trust and openness that had made our childhood friendship so special had been replaced by caution and emotional distance. My aunt's condition stabilized somewhat with medication and regular monitoring, but the cognitive effects lingered. She retained some of the paranoid thinking patterns that had caused so much damage, though they were less intense and focused on different subjects. She seemed to understand, on some level, that she'd made mistakes during her illness, but couldn't fully grasp the extent of what had been lost. The saddest part was watching her try to encourage me and my cousin to spend time together again, not understanding that the window for rebuilding our friendship had closed years earlier. She'd suggest activities we used to enjoy, mention memories from our childhood, ask why we didn't hang out like we used to. Her attempts to fix what she'd broken only highlighted how impossible it had become to go back. Family gatherings became uncomfortable reminders of what we'd all lost. My cousin and I would be polite to each other, exchange pleasantries about school and future plans, but the spark that had once made us inseparable was gone. We were like distant relatives who happened to share some childhood memories rather than the best friends we'd once been. I found myself grieving not just for the friendship we'd lost, but for the person my cousin had been before years of restrictions and separation changed her fundamental nature. The confident, imaginative girl who had been my closest companion was gone, replaced by someone competent and accomplished but guarded and emotionally distant. As we both headed off to different colleges, I realized that our story didn't have a happy ending where everything worked out and relationships were restored. Sometimes damage is permanent, even when it's caused by circumstances beyond anyone's control. Sometimes understanding why something happened doesn't make it possible to fix the consequences. My aunt's paranoia had created a self-fulfilling prophecy in the worst possible way. Her fear that our close friendship was inappropriate had destroyed the innocent, sibling-like bond we'd actually shared, leaving us both feeling like we'd lost a fundamental part of our childhood and family connection. The irony was brutal. In trying to protect us from something that wasn't real, she'd caused real harm that couldn't be undone. Looking back now, I understand that my aunt was a victim of her medical condition as much as my cousin and I were victims of its effects. But understanding doesn't erase the years of confusion, the lost friendship, or the way paranoia can poison even the most loving family relationships. Some stories don't have villains or heroes, just sad circumstances that nobody could fully control and consequences that nobody wanted but everyone had to live with.